Oftentimes, people love to read, but the rest of language arts isn't their favorite thing. Writing can be especially challenging to do, let alone teach. So today we are going to explain just how easy teaching writing with Sonlight Language Arts can be. I am Sunny, Sonlight's community manager and a Sonlight mom of two children who have been educated entirely with Sonlight and Sonlight's language arts. And I'm excited to talk to you about that today. Joining me now are Sheila and Rhonda. Sheila, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. We started homeschooling when my oldest was in kindergarten, and I have 3 kids, and I am now a retired homeschool mom. So we have used Sonlight throughout our homeschooling career, and they are all graduated from college and moved on.
Well, thank you for being here. Rhonda, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I am a mom of 5 homeschooled kiddos with Sonlight, and they are all indeed also graduated and doing great. And I exclusively pretty much use Sonlight once I found it. And you know what? I'm still involved because I have grandchildren being educated with Sonlight. So that's really cool. And then I've been using Sonlight Language Arts and writing skills in a co-op situation for junior high and high school. So even though I'm retired, not totally.
Semi-retired Sonlight mom, right?
Semi. My own children.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and talk about Sonlight's language arts. For somebody who's new and doesn't know anything about Sonlight's language arts, how do we teach, especially in the early grades when kids are learning to write for the first time? How does Sonlight do that?
Well, I would say that just the entire setup of Sonlight itself, the fact that you're reading to your child, they're reading good language, they're hearing good language, all those things, that is the start of the writing process, and that continues for a lifetime. And just the very fact that we read entire novels and things like that, one of my favorite things to say is writing is thinking, and you have to be able to think to write. And if you don't feed your child good pieces of literature and aren't speaking to them and things like that, it's difficult for them to write. It's like telling your child that you've not fed for 3 weeks. Child, go outside and you run 3 marathons and you've not even fed them. And so it's that feeding process. It's a long-term process. We're definitely not a quick fix situation. We're using good language to teach good language writing skills, essentially. And for a more detailed process, we use the fact that we do the copy work. And the copy work is, again, what you're doing with your child is they've just read that piece of writing, and then they're looking at it and analyzing it and doing new activities with it. And they're learning all the skills that they need to then start writing independently. And we even support that so well. And so there's more details, but I'll let Sheila take it from here. How's that, Sheila? Because I've talked a lot.
I like to emphasize the fact that language arts has multiple pieces to it. So whereas math is just math, well, I guess there are components to math as well, right? There's computation that you have to learn different pieces to, but it's all enveloped in a topic called math. And it's the same with language arts. And so writing is only one piece of the language arts, but it is prefaced by reading. So we expose our kids to really good literature because they can catch a lot of writing by reading. So if you notice when your kids are with friends, or even I with my husband, I spend a lot of time with my husband, and I find that I pick up some of the ways that he says things. My dad has a lot of really quirky ways of saying things, sayings, and my kids have picked up on the way my dad will say things. So a lot of our language is caught just by sheer exposure. So when we expose our kids to good writing through reading, they are building a vocabulary, they are building a pattern of good writing. So yeah, so when we do copy work, there is method to that. There is a reason that we do copy work. We are exposing our kids to good writing. They are copying really well-written sentences, and in exposing them to that, we can then talk about the components of the writing. So we can break down good sentence structure. A sentence begins with a capital letter. It has to have a subject and a verb. It has to have ending punctuation. And we can talk through those components through the copy work that they do. When kids do the copy work, what is my role in that? So I want to see if they were able to copy it exactly as it was written. So if they are using a capital letter in the middle of a sentence when it's not a proper noun, when it's not the name of something, then I can point out to them like, no, we don't capitalize the word at unless it's the very beginning of the sentence, and we can talk about that. I double check to make sure that they are spelling it exactly the same, because they are copying it. They're not relying on their memory. They should be able to copy it. I also like to connect the dots for my kids that when the Bible was passed down to us, it was hand copied over and over and over again until the printing press came out. And so it is imperative that the writers of the Bible, when they were copying a scroll, that they would copy it exactly. So it is my child's job to copy it exactly. And when they don't, then we talk through what is wrong with what their copy work is. But I love the progression. It's a very natural progression of teaching writing, teaching reading. It is phonics based, so we do teach the letter sounds, not just what the letters look like, and we do teach blends and all those things. It is a very controlled progression, and I love that it uses real books as the copy work material. So it's not just arbitrary sentences, it's something that they've been exposed to because it's coming from their reader that they are reading. And then, so it starts with just letter acquisition, and then word acquisition, and then short sentences, and then multiple sentences. And then we teach paragraph writing using a really creative approach. And then once a child knows how to compose a well-constructed paragraph with a topic sentence, 3 supporting points, and a conclusion, then from that point on, they are learning how to write multiple paragraphs, and it just keeps going.
Yeah, and I love it. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so the copy work, and Sheila did just a beautiful job of explaining the details of that. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, while we're doing that good language with copy work every day with real books, then the other thing we're doing is we're doing creative expression also. And that's the part where the child you'll get some sort of prompt, and they will give you a one day. Typically, the way it's outlined in the language arts is that typically you will do a brainstorming day. And the thing to remember here is that Sonlight's goal is to have your child writing like every day. And so that it becomes second nature, not like, oh my gosh, it's writing day. Just that it's a little bit every day. And if you're in there with them and you're helping them brainstorm, there's nothing wrong with when they're littles to be writing for them and to say to them and then read back to them. Don't like take the tactic of like, oh, let me adultize this or let me fix it. Write exactly what they said and then go back and read it to them and say, is that what you wanted to say? Did you want to say anything different? So that they're hearing their own language, and you're starting that editing process even with the littles. Eventually, I would definitely say partnering with them as long as you can is so paramount, because none of us likes to work kind of in a vacuum. Some of us are more, introverted than others, but it's always good to have somebody reflecting with us and to notice maybe the progress that we've made. And it can be as simple as, oh my goodness, I see what you did. You left a space between each word. That's amazing. I can tell which word says what. And so you're just celebrating those little things. And there's such a fun day to be able to do that brainstorming. And that's all you do for that day, just maybe 10, 15 minutes. Then the next day, they're going to have them write a little bit, and you can partner with them. They can do it all themselves, just depending on where they are. And then the next day will be perhaps editing that, but you never want it to make it be that it ends up an whole day event of whatever the thing is. If you're struggling, if there's a struggle, you just give it 10, 15 minutes and move on and repeat, go back another day. And I think the most encouraging thing I can say is, I know it's hard when you're in the trenches every single day, but let me encourage you to look back at progress, not even from 2 weeks ago. Think about 6 months ago and where you were, and or a year ago. And that is such a better picture of what it will be like. And then the other thing to do is, when your child does write something and you celebrate it, it's so good to send that writing to, grandma or auntie, whoever it is, so that they get comment on their writing and that it's celebrated with them. And that'll make it more enjoyable. The more fun you can have, obviously, the more likely somebody's going to want to repeat that process.
Yeah, I love everything you said. You've described it so well. I mean, I think when my kids first started with Sonlight, I didn't really know how to teach them how to do anything yet, but the instructor's guides really do make it so easy to know, and it builds on each other so gradually that, you might start with a very short sentence and all they're focused on is you capitalize the first letter. And then as they get longer, okay, there's periods at the end of some sentences, exclamation points at the end of others, and quotation marks and all of that as the kid moves along. And you both mentioned when you read that great literature, your kids' vocabularies really take off. I mean, I love talking to little Sonlight kids because they have these excellent vocabularies. Rhonda, you already alluded to it. And I know right now my son is in 2nd grade. And so I still act as his scribe on all of the creative expression because his thoughts are so big and they go so fast that he's not at the writing level yet to actually, how do I spell that word while I'm trying to write that, and those types of things. So what are some solutions for those kids that, they have all the ideas, but they can't actually physically write it quite yet, or, it still takes them a while to sound out the words, or maybe they're at the level where they can spell everything, but writing is hard for them to keep up with those thoughts. So what are some ideas for kind of that middle transitional period where they can read and they can kind of write, but their ideas are still a lot bigger than what their skill level is?
I would definitely give them paper, depending on how little they are, but paper that, like lined paper, and maybe a whole sheet of lined paper, and let them learn how to give them the, space in the room that it doesn't have to be perfect, and teach them to maybe write each sentence or idea filling like every other line. And so that way you're like, it's fine. This is our first draft. First drafts always look like this. First draft, and just let that be okay, and tell them not to stress over it, to just move along. Also, it can be transitional too if you're maybe taking turns writing the sentences. That would be a great way to just kind of, tiptoe out the back door with your child, where maybe you were fully scribing to maybe every other sentence, to maybe you just start and maybe you end with them. That's what I would do, is just kind of tiptoe out that door. And I think the idea too of this is first draft. Be brave, just go. And then it's even fun if you wanted to. I mean, you can always find pictures of people's or your own work of, big scratch out. Like it's not a perfection thing. In other words, like that's for later. That's for when we go back and we edit. We're just getting the ideas down. And that would be my biggest thing is it's always about content. It's always about ideas. That book learning of how to write a word with the correct spelling and those kinds of things in a way, that's the easy part. It's getting that content, those ideas. And if your child has that, count that a huge win, because that's the fabulous part. And that's hard. That's harder. That's more difficult. And that's why we read and speak and do all the things for our child. So that's what I would say, is just transition, kind of sneak out a little bit.
In my case, my oldest and my youngest are both dyslexic. So when we first started homeschooling, I didn't know we were dealing with that. And so I had read somewhere to act as your child's scribe. And so we did that for a long time because handwriting was painful for my son, like actually writing the stories out. So in 3rd grade, I was like, okay, well, this is getting to be old. So I taught my 3rd grader to type. I wanted him to learn how to type, not peck, hunt and peck. And so we started a typing program. And I tell you, once he could type, his writing took off, because before, when he was having to write out his story, when I was tired of scribing for him, I felt like he was 8 years old and he should be able to write his own stories. So when I was making him write his own stories, he would, the bare minimum, the, sentence, verb, no adjectives, no adverbs, no prepositional phrases, nothing. It was the dog barked. That's it. Once he learned to type, oh my, the yellow lab barked loudly at while he chased down the the writing took off, because now it wasn't like, what is the least amount that I can do because my hand hurts or I can't form the letters. I'm convinced that dyslexia and dysgraphia is somehow connected because the reversals and all that stuff, but that's not scientific. So he would do anything he could to get out of writing until he learned to type. So I would say, if you have a child who is very, very reluctant in the actual writing piece, teach that child to type, or don't be afraid to be that child's scribe. You sit at the computer and let him dictate to you what his stories are. And then he is released from the agony of learning, of actually forming the words. That's my other tip too, is that when you're trying to figure out how to grade, you need to name what matters in that piece right now. So if you are grading spelling, then spelling is the piece that matters and handwriting does not. If you're grading handwriting, then that's the piece that matters and composition does not, or, original thought or whatever does not. Like, think about what the assignment is, and that is the piece that you are grading to make sure it's okay. When they are writing creatively, when they're asked to write a story, or they're asked to do a recollection, recall it a time when you blah, 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 blah. That is the piece that is getting graded, not the handwriting, not the penmanship, not the spelling, not the letter formation, none of that. Their original thought and how, how they're putting it together and their choice of words and those kinds of things. Now, once you get that down on paper, whether you let them type or whether you write it for them or they write it for themselves, then you can go back and edit. And editing is every writer, right? Like the biggest writer, Stephen King, Agatha Christie, like all the biggest writers have an editor. Everybody needs an editor. No one can fix all of their own problems themselves. They can self-edit, they can catch things. I always encourage my students, when I taught a writing class, to read their papers out loud, because when they read it out loud, they will hear mistakes that they wouldn't catch because they know what they want to say. And so they can, their mind will fix it. But if they're reading it out loud, their ear will hear it. Wait, that doesn't sound right. That subject verb agreement isn't right. Or, oh no, I need an ly on that. That's an adverb. I need to add an ly or whatever. So when they read it out loud to themselves, they will often catch their own mistakes, and they need time away from their writing. So if they write it and then you ask them to fix it right away, bless you, and you ask them to fix it right away, it's too soon. They haven't had time away. I will edit my emails. Like, I walk away and come back when I want to send an email that it's not just to a friend. I will walk away from an email, go get a drink of water, come back and reread it. Like, I edit everything I write, even a text. I check it for, oh, did Siri autocorrect it to something different? Were is always weird. Siri likes to cut autocorrect W-E-R-E to W-E''re. So it's always good to take the time to walk away and then come back and edit. And then mom needs to have the fresh eyes to be able to see what the child can't see. So whether it is spelling, whether it is like, oh, you need to have this paragraph break here, every writer needs an editor.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point, to make sure that when you're editing, I think it's important to do that process together. That it's so much more of a teamwork. And I tend to try to talk to the child as that they are the writer. They are writers. And did you leave your reader over there at the curb? Because I think you might have, or did you let them put their foot in a pothole? And they'll kind of get that idea. And I think reading together, absolutely. Even high schoolers, I would edit together. Like Sheila says, absolutely. Editing, I think, always has to be done at a different time. You can't just write and then edit. You'll catch a few things. You're not going to catch it. But to go back another day, and they can do that themselves, but then at some point, I would still say, just like she's saying, people have editors, like professional editor. It's still good to have somebody else to point those things out to you. You're not going to catch it all. When I write something, I have other eyes look at it. I do.
Yeah,
because and I've been writing for years, but somebody else will look at it.
Well, and I find, for me personally, even when I type, sometimes my fingers are so used to typing a certain word that it doesn't even translate into what I was trying to say. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's important. And as my daughter has gotten older, I do a lot of the, she'll assume things maybe that the reader knows, but I'm like, wait a second, if you're coming to this and you don't have that background information, we need to include that level of detail. And so that's something that we've seen as she's gotten older, like it's things like that more so than spelling and grammar and those types of things that you work with a younger child. But how do you kind of figure out like what level that child's at and what your expectations should be for them performing certain skills? So like Sheila, you mentioned when your son started typing, his writing took off. How do you know if it's a situation like that where, oh, maybe I need to have them type, or maybe I need to have them handwrite this? Or how do you really figure out if your expectation is appropriate for where that child is?
So I think a lot of times when I talk to parents, they want to pick a level that is at the child's highest common denominator. So like a lot of times they will choose a level based on their reading level, because they can, they may have a 6-year-old who's reading chapter books. Oh, he's reading the Narnia books. I'm like, yeah, but can you write a Narnia book level sentence? Then you need to, break it down a little lower. I think part of it is just getting familiar with what your child can do. So if you're starting with kindergarten, you're not pulling a child out of school, then you can pretty much say you're starting at the beginning. You're starting at the starting line. They don't know their letters. They don't know their sounds, none of that. So that's where you start. But if they're already able to read some, then are they able to write at that same level? So if you think about a first grade reader, those are usually very short sentences, maybe some long vowel sounds, but not a whole lot of blending, large font, 3 or 4 sentences per page, and then 2 pages is a chapter. That's the kind of book that is typically about a first grade reader book. So can your child write a short sentence? Can they write multiple sentences? Like, their writing should match what they are reading. So if they're reading way above, but they're not writing at that level, then you need to kind of bring it down to where they're at the same level. Do you have tears every time you say it's time to write? Then you're probably pushing your child too far. Like they're not ready to write a 3-paragraph essay if they can't even write a well-constructed one paragraph consisting of 5 sentences. So I think part of it is just taking stock of what your child can do right now and move from there. And it's okay if you have a 10-year-old who can only write a few sentences. You start there and you build, you grow. Don't feel like, oh, we're behind, we have to cram all this stuff in. The other thing I did want to mention that I forgot to mention before is that I love that Sonlight is not a worksheet driven curriculum, that we're not doing 20 sentences on finding a noun and 20 sentences on circling the adverb or whatever, because that is like, I think it's like a different side of the brain. You're not actually engaging the part of the brain that actually helps you write. It's almost like a puzzle. You're figuring out a puzzle, but you're not learning how to put words together to form well-constructed sentences. So we do have worksheets, but they are not, it's not a worksheet driven curriculum. So you're not going to have pages of that every day. And it's, like I said, it's a very natural progression. So the sentences that you are working from are not just arbitrary, perfectly formed sentences. You may have to do some digging because it's actually a spoken word or a fragment, because we sometimes speak in fragments. So keep that in mind when you are looking at the curriculum for the first time. I talk to people in the Sonlight booth that say, well, where are the workbooks? Well, we don't have a lot of workbooks. We do carry some optional materials, and I only advise them using them when you have multiple students that you need to keep busy. It is busy work. It's good busy work, but it is busy work. But sometimes you need, here, you work on this workbook while I work with your brother over here, math, reading, whatever, and it keeps them busy. But do you have to have that? No, you don't. It's busy work.
Yeah. Well, and also remember that in those lower grades especially, and I love what Sheila said about the fact that you really want to make sure that when you choose a language arts, that you're choosing the one that matches what they can write, not what they can read, because often they don't match. And you had definitely, if you don't want tears for an entire year and you end up frustrated and sad, then what you need to do is choose the language arts that matches their writing. And if they've come out of a school situation, there's also, remember this, that Sonlight will give the child lots of different kinds of writing experiences. And if you determine that because of where your child is or what's happening in your life, if you determine that, you know what, we need more time for this. We can't, if the writing assignment, typically it's scheduled over like 3 days. And if you can't do that and that's too much and you need more time on something, that's fine. Take 2 weeks, do whatever. And what you can do, you guys, is go to the scope and sequence at the back of the book. And you can go, okay, well, we did this type of writing. Okay, I'm not going to do this next assignment. I'm going to do this one when this one comes up. So there's no tyranny for yourself of, oh my gosh, we did not do every writing assignment. That's okay. What you did was quality. You went for the time that they need to develop whatever that writing assignment was. That's what you want to do. And the other resource, well, a couple of resources I want to mention was that, especially in the lower grades, in the elementary years, Sonlight has the Appendices, that's the language arts skills checkoff sheets. And so you can see, okay, this is what an average kid does. And that will just help you. It's not a do or die, must be happening sort of thing, but it does give you ballpark, okay, yeah, we're getting there. We're on that goal. And it's children, just like anything else, are going to develop differently for different skills. And that's okay too. They may rock and roll one part of the writing and struggle with another part, and that's okay. Then you know where to work. And that's the freedom that Sheila was talking about of not having workbooks. That's the beauty, the glory, the freedom of the Sonlight style is that when you're pulling a child out of public school and you're like, I don't know what they know, you know, that's okay, because you're going to find out. And it's super, super easy. In a way, it doesn't matter what the writing assignment is, because a child will approach it or do it at the level that they are able. And you can pull them farther along. Just like I used to teach in public school, I taught K through 3. Guess what? I gave the same writing prompt to everybody. I had taught the same material to everybody, but guess what? My kindergartner will draw me a picture and maybe be able to put a couple letters. My first grader might be able to put a sentence. I've got second graders who are writing, a few, and I had third graders who wrote me paragraphs. So that's great. That's the beauty of this no workbook situation. The other thing I was going to tell you is that they also include through junior high-ish levels, a grammar appendices. And I was leafing through that again this morning, just trying to oh yeah, right. And I was like, man, there's a lot of support. Okay, I'm just gonna say that. You're not gonna need more. And there is, if you feel like it, or you have a high schooler or something like that, you can get the old writer's ink. It has all that grammar, and it has examples of different types of writing, but that would definitely be for an older child. But if that makes you feel better, there's a good resource for you.
Yeah, so you both talked about placing kids at their writing level versus their reading level. If you are not familiar, Sonlight does have all those assessments on our website, so that if you're pulling a kid out of school and you don't really know what they know or don't know, that's a quick, easy way to kind of assess it before you order your program. But let's talk a little bit about grading it. You mentioned grammar rules and things like that. What if you, as the parent, do not feel you know the grammar rules, or you're not a great proofreader, and your kids are starting to get a little bit older? It's one thing to grade one sentence, it's a whole other thing to grade a research paper. So how do you grade language arts assignments with Sonlight, and how does the Sonlight Instructor's Guide and rubric make that easy for someone who doesn't feel that they are a strong proofreader or editor themselves?
Well, like you mentioned, Sonlight has the rubrics, and they are pretty, just whatever the assignment was, they'll have rubrics that match. They'll say a few things like, did they sequentially tell the story, or something like that. That would be for like a younger child, but it'll just put down the basics of what the assignment was, and then you can see. And one thing I would definitely do with an older child is I would actually give that rubric to them before they start writing, so they know where they're going and what their goals are, is one thing I would do. And the other thing that I found, to be honest, I learned so much of this stuff with my child. So it's no bad thing. You do not have to be, queen of grammar and queen of sentence construction when you're working with a junior high or a high schooler. That's not it. It is actually probably healthier to say, ooh, something doesn't seem right. Let's look at it together and either find something in the appendices that we have for the grammar rules, or look it up, and learn together. And I think just that idea of what that's increasing is the idea of being, what our tagline for Sonlight, being a lifelong learner, that you're interested in it too, and you're partnering with your child. And I know we don't always have all this glorious time to do these things. Understand that you're under a time crunch sometimes, but it is important to find that time, take that time, and soon they'll learn to do some of those things for themselves, and they'll be able to hear. But again, I've talked to college professors numerous times and read research papers and all kinds of things like that, and they will tell you the most important thing, and to become a good writer that is grammar free and grammar error free, is well written. How about we'll say that, well written, is the reading, and hearing the reading out loud. And to not, don't think that that's not important. That continues to be part of the writing process, even as they're older. And so I guess I'm saying, don't get all upset about those kind of grammar things. And when I'm grading, especially older kids' papers, if I'm looking at them, I will generally, I know my child, just like you would know your child, and I will generally pick on one thing that I know that we want to work on. So I'm not going to I might say something or point it out, but that's not going to be my main thing. So if we're working on active voice, well, then I'm going to talk about active voice the whole time, and that'll be our focus. And you can tell them too, if that's your focus, just like Sheila said before, then tell them we're going to go for active voice, because active voice, like nothing else, powerhouses your writing and makes it strong. So that is something that I tend towards for especially high school, is that active voice. So again, did I know that, 20 years ago? No, I did not. I have learned it by working with my own children.
Yeah, I was an English major in college, and I tell you, I did not have a single grammar class in college. It was all about writing about the literature. It was all about, analyzing and themes and all those kinds of things. So I basically relearned grammar when I taught my kids. Yes, I vaguely knew, the parts of speech and stuff, but if you quizzed me, how many parts of speech are there? I would not have been able to give you the number 8. I would have thought there were a lot more, because there's, there are pieces and parts of them. So I learned a lot of it right along with my kids. So I think part of it is that you are paying attention. This is not, homeschooling is not where you just hand the kid the workbook and have fun, go do it. You are involved. So there are tons of notes in the Language Arts Instructor's Guide, giving you definitions of what those parts of speech are. And so you are learning right along with them. As much as is possible, Sonlight gives you answer keys. So there are the answer keys to, like, the little grammar pieces. It's called mechanics practice, but it's the grammar piece.
Yeah.
So you will have an answer key for that. You will have an answer key for if there is, like, if you do choose to do the workbooks, you will have an answer key for that. So again, you're paying attention and you're like, oh, I would have said it was there, but it's actually here, whatever. So when you are teaching, that's the best way to learn, is to actually teach, because you have to really know the material in order to teach it. A lot of the notes are scripted so that you can literally just read it out loud to the child as if you were speaking it. So as you are reading it, you are also hearing it and learning it and absorbing it. So we do not, in my house, we don't polish every single paper. Like Rhonda was saying, we write every day. We write a paper a week. It's different kinds of writing. It might be a journal entry. It could be a poem. It could be a narrative. It can be, expository. There's all kinds of writing. So we do not polish every single paper. I choose maybe 2 a quarter to polish. So what I mean by that is that we go back and we rewrite it, and then we go back and we rewrite it and we rewrite it. So that way we do catch every spelling error, every grammar mistake, any transition that needs to be polished up. Like, we want it to be perfect, but we don't do that for every paper. Some papers, it's just, let's get these ideas, let's let them flow, let's get them down on paper, and we move on. So don't think that every single thing has to be completely perfect. There are tools out there. If you did not get a good education and you do not feel like a strong writer, I have a relative who was like that. There are tools. There's Grammarly. I have not had to use it because I love grammar. And in fact, I have, a t-shirt that says I'm silently correcting your grammar. But if that is your thing, then you can use Grammarly. And if you need to pay for a subscription, that's okay. That's part of your tools, in your tool belt. You can get a tutor, someone like me who loves grammar and is happy to grade your child's paper for a fee. So again, you're not polishing all of them. So you might choose to do 6 a year, 10 a year. Those are some ideas about how to either be the grader at home or find someone else to do that piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. For those of you watching, if you need help placing a level, you can always reach out to our Sonlight advisors. Also, if you are not a part of our Sonlight Connections community, either on Facebook or in the app, I urge you to join. It is not uncommon to see photos of, here's my son who's 9 years old, and this is what he wrote today. Does this seem appropriate for him, at this age? Or, here's my child who's in 2nd grade. Can you read this? Does it make sense? Or whatever it may be. So you can get feedback from other Sonlight users when you are a part of that community, as well as our mentors and advisors are in there. So you can get so many helpful hints and suggestions, and just from our Sonlight community as well, to find out, is this okay? Is this appropriate? Is this normal for this level? And again, like we've talked about, Sonlight Language Arts, it's very sequential. It's built on top of skills you learn, and I have found it to be relatively simple to teach. And like you guys said, just a little bit every day, and your kids do develop those writing skills in spelling and grammar and all the things that go along with writing. So I really appreciate both of you for being here, and thank you so much.